Hey friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Connor. I'm a fourth year medical student here at King's College London. For those of you who don't know me, I make videos aimed mostly at aspiring medical students, but also anyone who's interested in medicine. One of the things that I'm really crap at, and I know I'm crap at and I definitely need to get better at, is acknowledging small victories, celebrating those small victories, and using those as kind of a springboard to achieve more. Recently, I passed the 100 subscriber mark, and although I've kind of tried to downplay it a little bit, I'm really thrilled. Like 100 people subscribing to this channel, 100 people thinking that I have something valuable to say, 100 people caring enough, that just means so much to me. So I put a call out on my Instagram stories a couple of days ago asking for any questions that people might have. I thought we could do a little question and answer. As I go around my day, I'm going to be videoing myself answering some of these questions. And you guys get to know a little bit more about me. I get to say thank you to you amazing people who've already subscribed, and I also get to say thank you to all of you who are going to watch this video and subscribe. Before I get on with my day and take you with me and start answering some of the more difficult questions, some of the ones I have to actually think about, how old am I? Well, I'm 24 years old. By the time I graduate and actually become a doctor, I'm going to be 26 years old, and I will have been at medical school for 7 years. The reason I will have been at medical school for 7 years by the time I graduate is because I am on a 6-year medical course. So I'm on the extended medical degree program. In the UK, the majority of people do a 5-year medical course. Some people, if you're say a graduate, you manage to get onto a 4-year medical course where you do your first 2 years crammed into 1 year. And I've kind of done the opposite of that. So my first 2 years were the equivalent of the first 1 year. So I kind of split that first year in half. I'm on this course for multiple reasons. Effectively, I didn't get my A-level grades to go onto a 5-year course, again for a variety of reasons, probably being dyslexic is part of that. The reason it's 7 is because in the middle of that, between my year 3 and my year 4, I decided to intercalate. Intercalating is where you take a year off of medicine and you get to study an undergraduate bachelor's degree in normally a subject of your choice. I chose to do that in imaging sciences, not because I necessarily want to be a radiologist, but because I find the science and the physics quite interesting. I definitely want to become a surgeon. That's kind of my current trajectory, given how minimally invasive everything is becoming, given how it's the kind of the interventional radiologists who are taking over lots of procedures from the surgeons. It'll be really good to have a better understanding of that. I'm going to be 26 when I finish instead of 25, because not only am I on a longer course, but I also decided to take a gap year between my A-levels and going to university. That was definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made. I spent a fantastic year. I had 6 months working in Sydney, Australia, spent another few months working in and around Australia. I then spent some fantastic weeks in New Zealand and a month in Thailand, half of which was by myself doing freediving. The other half was with my older brother, and we were actually there for his 30th birthday, which was fantastic. That can 100% be a subject for another vlog. If you're interested, please leave a comment below and I'll have a think about doing that video. I now need to get up and get on with my day, so I'm going to be taking you with me, so hold tight for the next question. The next question that was asked in the Instagram stories was whether I thought people over 35 were too old to apply for medicine. There is no upper limit to applying for medicine. There definitely used to be. I think if you're 35, I would obviously be going for a graduate course over a non-graduate course, because a graduate course is 4 years instead of 5. You're definitely going to be surrounded by people a lot younger than you. So I think there are definitely people in their 30s on my course now. I would say that you need to be prepared to defend yourself. So you need to be prepared to say, okay, well, you're 35, you've obviously had a life, you've been doing stuff for the last 35 years, or for the last 17 years out of education. I think you would need to be prepared to defend why now is the time for medicine, and why medicine wasn't what you just got up and did straight after A-levels. And there's loads of reasons. It could just be that you've only just realised that medicine is for you. Maybe you had a moment where you realised that that's what you needed to be doing, or maybe life got in the way. I think for lots of people, life can just get in the way. Suddenly you're not 18 anymore and you're 35, and that's absolutely fine. You're still allowed to apply for medicine 100%. Now the opposite is true in terms of a lower age limit. Lots of universities have a lower age limit, particularly the kind of big London universities. Lots of them say that you need to be at least 17 at the point of applying. Some medical schools have no lower limit, although I think you would run into trouble if you were like 15 and trying to get into some placements. if you were 15 and maybe doing some dissections, maybe that wouldn't be allowed. So I would personally set a lower age limit of 18 on applying for medicine. I think if you're less than 18, I don't think you're ready. I was 19 when I started and turned 20 in my first year. So I was actually older than at least half of the cohort at the time, just by a year, but at the time that felt like a lot. But yeah, really good question, really good question. No, there's no upper limit to studying medicine or to applying for medicine, but you need to be prepared to have some questions that will be very specific to you about why you are applying at the point when you're applying. But yeah, thank you, that's a great question. Do you have any study tips for first year medical students? Absolutely I do. So I think the key thing about studying in the first year of medical school is you need to remember that it would be impossible to know everything. There is so much content that they expect you to be able to answer questions on in the first year of medical school that it's just not realistic to think that you would be able to answer every single question in an exam. The really important thing about your studying, if, like King's, you have a multiple choice exam, is that you need to have studied everything at least once, because that way you can make informed guesses. And honestly, that's the key to doing well in medical school in multiple choice exams, is being able to exclude answers. Not necessarily knowing the answer, it would be impossible to know the correct answer having read just the stem of a question for the 100, 150 questions you have. What you're aiming for is you're aiming to be able to rule out 2, 3 of those options in every single question. Obviously there'll be lots of questions if you studied properly where you'll be able to just know the answer from reading the stem, but the majority of the time, in reality, you're going to be just excluding answers and then guessing. You only need to answer enough questions correctly to pass the exam. First year for most people doesn't count at all towards your final grade, so you really don't need to worry about being in the top 25 or 15%. What I really found useful was having a look at all of the topics that I was expected to know in the year, thinking, okay, which of these am I good at? Which of these am I crap at? Which of these do I enjoy studying? And which of these am I going to sit down to study and within 5 minutes realise that I'm sitting on my phone and not actually reading my textbook or watching slides? You then need to double down on the things you enjoy and that you're good at, then you just kind of need to pay lip service to the rest. Obviously there's not really anything that you could say, oh, I don't need to know this, because all of the science that's in a medical curriculum is there for a reason. But I'm going to take a classic example here, the Krebs cycle. In my first year I learned the Krebs cycle well enough that I could probably answer 3 out of every 5 questions that might come up on the Krebs cycle, but that's enough. That's all you need to know, really. Almost no doctor needs to be an expert in the Krebs cycle. And it's the same for a lot of the first year stuff. There are some things I wouldn't include in that. There are some things I think you just need to know. For me, the main one there would be anatomy, because that doesn't change. And once you know the anatomy, then a lot of other stuff starts to make sense. At most medical schools, your first year exams cover topics in anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, cell biology, microbiology, and pathology. You need to choose which of those you're really going to focus on. And the ones that I found interesting, the ones I enjoyed learning and then therefore was good at, was anatomy and physiology. And I think I liked these ones the most because once you know where things should be and how things should be working, then it becomes quite easy to work out when things are in the wrong place or something's gone anatomically wrong, or when something is misbehaving, an organ isn't working like it should. So when there's something pathological happening in an organ and it's not behaving like it should physiologically. There are tons of ways of revising for a medical school exam, and the way that I've revised has changed, especially changed a lot since first year. I think that the best way to revise for the type of exam that you get in first year is flashcards. That's definitely kind of where I've landed and where I will plant my flag, is flashcards. I've never actually used Anki. I never used pre-made flashcards. I found that the act of making them was just as good for me as the act of reading them. I ended up using a much less well-known app called Chegg. I really wouldn't recommend Chegg. The main thing that I want to be able to do with my flashcards now is to export them and have them as some kind of PDF. You cannot do that with Chegg. So if you are starting to write flashcards, find some kind of app, some kind of web service where you can make your flashcards and then print them, because I really wish I could do that now. At King's, we have our exams in kind of stages. So second and third year, the exam that really counts for that stage, which is the second stage of medical school, is at the end of third year. And for that exam, I think I made well over 2,000 flashcards just for that exam. Obviously you need much less for first year, it's just 1 year. I would really recommend starting to make flashcards now. The reason I love flashcards is that you can use them anywhere, especially if you have them in some kind of app that you can use on your phone, and you can spend any amount of time. So unlike past questions or writing up notes, you can just have 3-4 minutes and you can go through maybe a couple of flashcards. The other things that I found really useful in first year were mind maps, and I found this incredibly useful, especially for pharmacology. I'm dyslexic and I really struggled with some of the names of drugs, especially in first year, trying to memorize the different names of antibiotics and then remembering where in the bacterial cell cycle they acted and how that killed the bacteria. I found that really hard. So I found that by making mind maps and kind of remaking them, so making them with connections, the class of antibiotic to where it acts and how that kills bacteria, and then making it again with something to do with the name of the antibiotic and how it acts, and just kind of trying to make those connections with the mind maps. I found that really useful in first year. That really nicely brings me on to the last question I'm going to answer in this Q&A, and that is, what are my best tips on studying anatomy? Anatomy is something which quite a lot of people struggle with. I think it's one of those, either you love it or you hate it. If you're like me and you go to a university where you still get to dissect cadavers, you probably have a bit of a better understanding of anatomy than those who don't. I personally still think that dissection is the best way of learning anatomy. It means that you actually get your hands on the anatomy. The next best thing would be prosections. Now, prosections is different to dissections because a prosection is already done. So it will be where you have access to an already dissected section of anatomy, and you can touch it, you can manipulate it, you can work out where things are and how things relate to each other. So that's really what anatomy is. Anatomy is not necessarily just learning the name of everything, but it's working out how the blood supply to that organ runs and where that venous drainage leads to. The biggest thing about learning anatomy is, for me, being able to kind of manipulate it in 3 dimensions, and so that you can imagine it in 3 dimensions. So after dissection, after prosection, I would say anatomical models would be kind of the third best way of learning anatomy. So if you can get your hands on a anatomically correct model, and your medical school should have some that you can maybe go in and either borrow or use in a particular setting, or if not, maybe you and some mates can kind of band together and buy one off Amazon. I'm sure there are some. I can leave one in the description below. I think you need to be able to pick up and manipulate whatever it is you're trying to learn. If you're trying to learn about the brain and head and neck anatomy, you need to have a look at a skull, and you need to have a look at where the foramen and where the fossa are. I never bought anatomy flashcards. I didn't think that they were particularly useful because they just test you on one specific thing, and then you don't have any relation to whatever else is around it, and that's the important thing. If you're looking for something that you can just do on paper, you can do it kind of in the comfort of your own home or out and about, then don't do flashcards, do anatomical drawing. There are some really great anatomy drawing books, and I'm going to link one below in the description that you can get from Amazon. So maybe you can send that over to some friends, to some family, and they can get you for that for Christmas. But colouring books are a great way of kind of understanding where things are. You are using your hands, you're using more than one learning method, you're really trying to cram that into your brain. Even better than colouring books would be if you are a little bit artistic, and then either on an iPad or just on some paper, you can try and do some drawing of different muscle groups, or you can do some drawings of organs. I'm going to show you some now that I did. I actually did these in my second year after I bought my iPad. I would really recommend you buy Procreate. It's an amazing drawing app for iPads. I don't know if it's on any kind of Android tablets. I haven't had one, but Procreate is fantastic for drawing. I use it for all my doodling for fun, or for my drawing anatomy now. Thank you so much everyone who sent me in a question on my Instagram. If you do have any questions for me, please feel free to get in touch. You can leave a comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you as fast as I can, or you can direct message me over on Instagram. Have an amazing day. Thank you so much for watching this far. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out.